There is no good time to talk about Mr. Epstein.
In the grand halls of Buckingham Palace, silence often speaks louder than words. And now, after years of scandal, exile, and relentless public scrutiny, the royal family has broken that silence with a chilling update, one that few saw coming and none can ignore. Just 3 minutes ago, a statement was released that shocked the United Kingdom and sent royal watchers across the globe into a flurry of speculation and sorrow. Because whatever you thought you knew about Prince Andrew, this changes everything. Once considered the Queen's favorite son, Prince Andrew has spent the past few years buried under the weight of disgrace, stripped of titles, banished from public duties, and left to face the harsh spotlight of a scandal that rewrote his place in royal history. But today's announcement has little to do with legal battles or reputational ruin. It's far more personal and far more devastating. For the first time in years, the royal family is speaking not as an institution, but as a grieving family, confronting something that no crown can protect you from. And what heartbreaking truth about Prince Andrew. Are they finally ready to share with the world? Stay with us as we uncover the real story behind the words, the silence, and the pain that even royalty can no longer hide. For most of his life, Prince Andrew was a man who moved confidently through the corridors of privilege, his footsteps echoing in the great halls of Buckingham Palace as though they were made for him. He was dashing, daring, and once hailed as the royal family's most eligible bachelor, a war hero, a royal icon, a favored son. But the grandeur faded long ago, and in recent years, Prince Andrew has become something else entirely, a figure of shame, solitude, and now, deep concern. After his dramatic fall from public grace, following the explosive revelations and legal entanglements tied to his alleged involvement with Jeffrey Epstein, Andrew was all but erased from royal life. Stripped of his military titles, banished from the balcony at state events, and left to dwell inside the vast, echoing walls of Royal Lodge, he became a man exiled within his own home. For months, then years, he lived in seclusion, far from the spotlight he once relished. No speeches, no appearances, no redemption. And while the press kept its distance, whispers from inside the palace grew louder. Andrew was not well. Family insiders, once sworn to silence, began expressing concern, not about courtrooms or reputation, but about his state of mind. Close friends described him as withdrawn, isolated, a man who rarely answered calls, who let letters go unopened, who stopped smiling the way he used to. While the public focused on the scandal, those within royal circles saw something even more troubling, a man slowly disappearing from the inside. Sources close to the Duke began speaking of late-night walks through empty halls, hours spent staring out of windows, and a growing fixation with the past. Not the glorious kind, but the painful kind. The what-ifs, the regrets, the disgrace. The silence in Royal Lodge grew louder than any scandal ever could. And then came the health concerns, subtle at first, then undeniable. Reports of weight loss, of missed meals, of stress-induced fatigue that left Andrew unable to complete even simple tasks without retreating into isolation. His siblings noticed. So did palace aides, but the public heard nothing. Because in the royal family, image is everything, and pain, especially this kind, must remain locked behind gilded doors. But the human cost of disgrace is not so easily contained. And for Prince Andrew, the emotional toll has been catastrophic. What once was a man filled with arrogance and certainty has become a man haunted by everything he lost, and by a future with no clear path forward. The heartbreaking truth the royal family has now chosen to share isn't just about illness or decline. It's about the weight of silence, the kind that corrodes from within. And while they stopped short of giving full details, the tone of the official statement was unmistakable. Concern, grief, and the fear of something irreversible. They are no longer protecting Andrew's image. They are confronting his reality. And in doing so, they have pulled back the curtain on a man whose greatest battle is no longer with public opinion, but with himself. This isn't the fall of a prince, it's the quiet, ongoing collapse of a human being who once stood at the heart of the monarchy and now finds himself completely alone. Behind the grandeur of the British monarchy lies a truth the world rarely sees. When scandal strikes, the instinct is not to confront but to contain. And with Prince Andrew, the royal family did what they've done for generations. They closed ranks. At first they hoped it would pass, that the public would lose interest, that the legal complications could be handled behind the curtain and the shame buried quietly in the vaults of royal history. But this time there was no protocol for the kind of disgrace Prince Andrew brought upon them. The allegations, the connections to Epstein, the disastrous BBC interview, it was a tidal wave of humiliation, and suddenly, the Queen's so-called favorite son became a liability no amount of tradition could protect. Inside the palace, there were furious debates. Charles, then still the Prince of Wales, reportedly led the charge to distance the monarchy from Andrew's collapsing image. William agreed. Even Princess Anne, ever stoic, made it clear that the royal family could no longer shield one of their own without consequence. But through it all, one voice remained steady, the Queen's. She was torn between duty and devotion, heartbroken to see her son so publicly disgraced, and yet fiercely protective of him, as only a mother could be. But after the death of Queen Elizabeth II, everything changed. King Charles III inherited not just the crown, but the burden of scandal. And while his public stance remained diplomatic, those close to the new monarch say he has grown increasingly frustrated with his brother's refusal to stay out of the headlines, even as he sinks further into obscurity. The family's silence wasn't mercy, it was strategy. A cold, calculated effort to preserve the monarchy's fragile reputation, even if it meant abandoning Andrew behind palace walls. And so, while the world speculated and Andrew sank deeper into isolation, the royal family said nothing. Not because they didn't care, but because they didn't know what else to do. Behind closed doors, there were efforts to intervene. Quiet visits, gentle confrontations, discussions about therapy, relocation, even permanent exile abroad. But Andrew resisted. He insisted he was fine, that he was misunderstood, that one day the truth would emerge. But as the months stretched into years, it became clear he wasn't waiting for redemption. He was retreating from reality. One aide described him as a man trapped in the past, reliving old glories, unable to face what he's become. His daughters, Princess Beatrice and Princess Eugenie, remained loyal, but even they were said to be worried. Not just about the damage to the family's legacy, but about their father's health, both mental and physical. The man they loved was slipping into something darker, quieter, and far more dangerous than scandal. So why now? Why speak up after years of strategic silence? According to palace insiders, the answer is fear. The royal family is watching Prince Andrew deteriorate, not in public, but in private, hidden from the cameras, but not from those who still see the man he once was. The heartbreaking news they shared just minutes ago is the result of that fear, a warning, a reluctant admission that the damage is no longer just reputational, it may be irreversible. Because sometimes silence doesn't protect, it isolates. And in trying to save the institution, the royal family may have abandoned the one man who needed saving the most. Though the official statement released by the royal family was careful in its wording, calm, measured, almost clinical, it was the tone behind it that struck a chord. This was not a routine update. It was a quiet alarm bell, a signal to those paying attention that something has gone terribly wrong. Prince Andrew is not just out of the public eye, he's vanishing from himself. Multiple sources close to the Duke now speak of a man who has become increasingly unrecognizable, not because of age, but because of a steady, irreversible decline in spirit. He rarely leaves the grounds of Royal Lodge. His health has deteriorated in ways the public can only guess at, with recent reports suggesting deep fatigue, persistent weight loss, and bouts of depression that no palace doctor has been able to fully address. His appetite is erratic. His sleep is broken. He is described by those who still visit as a ghost of who he once was, a man who now shuffles rather than strides, who avoids mirrors, avoids questions, avoids himself. And perhaps most alarmingly of all, he has reportedly stopped asking about the future altogether. The Duke's mental state has become a growing concern, not just to his immediate family, but to those who once served him with quiet loyalty. He no longer expresses interest in world affairs. He avoids television. Newspapers are removed from the home. One former staffer, speaking on condition of anonymity, said, "He lives in a bubble made of shadows." The only moments of connection come through his daughters, who visit when they can, offering a lifeline to a man who increasingly pushes even them away. Prince Andrew is not angry. He is not defensive. He is detached, and that's what worries the people around him the most. He doesn't fight anymore. Not for his name, not for his place, not even for peace. He simply waits. For what? No one is certain. The tragedy lies not only in what he's lost, but in what he's become. A symbol of what happens when the royal machine closes its doors and forgets there's still a person inside. For all the talk of duty, decorum, and damage control, there remains a haunting reality behind palace gates. This is a man spiraling in slow motion, and very few seem willing to step in meaningfully. The royal family's announcement made no mention of specifics, no mention of diagnosis, no acknowledgement of mental health concerns, but read between the lines, and you'll find a deep undercurrent of fear. Not fear of scandal, but fear of something far worse: irreparable psychological collapse. They cannot ignore it anymore. And so they crafted a statement that was half warning, half apology, a way of saying, "We see it now," without saying much at all. But for the public, questions remain. Why was nothing said sooner? Why was he allowed to rot in silence while the world moved on? And now that the royal family has broken its silence, is it too late? Because if the man who once stood beside his mother on royal tours is now lost in a private maze of shame, regret, and retreat, then what does that say about the institution that let him wither in silence? This is no longer about reputation. This is about a life quietly crumbling, and a monarchy that, for all its tradition, still hasn't figured out how to face the human cost of its crown. What comes next for Prince Andrew is the question no one inside the royal family dares to answer out loud. Because the truth is, there is no roadmap, no carefully choreographed exit strategy, no ceremonial redemption arc, no royal precedent for what to do when one of their own fades, not just from public life, but from the very will to keep going. The heartbreaking update released just moments ago was more than a press statement. It was a quiet surrender, a reluctant admission that the family has exhausted its options, that Andrew's retreat into isolation is no longer a choice. It's a symptom of something far more serious. The talk now, whispered behind palace doors, is about long-term care, about scaling down the royal lodge, about keeping the Duke safe, but far enough from the limelight to preserve what's left of the monarchy's dignity. Because though his title still exists, though his name remains etched in royal history, Prince Andrew is no longer considered part of the future. Not by his family, not by the institution, and increasingly not even by himself. There's no official talk of abdication. He already gave up his duties. No announcement of relocation. He's been in exile for years. But behind the formal language and polished phrases, the royal family's message is clear. They are preparing for an end. Not necessarily of life, but of legacy. An end to any hope that he might recover his standing, return to public favor, or restore the dignity lost to scandal and silence. And for Andrew, perhaps that is the cruelest irony of all. Because for a man who once stood proudly alongside his mother, Her Majesty the Queen, waving to crowds from palace balconies and dining with presidents, his final chapter is playing out alone, behind iron gates and ivy-covered walls, in a house that feels more like a mausoleum than a home. The monarchy will survive, of course. It always does. It adapts, it moves forward, it rewrites the story. But for the man once known as the Duke of York, the rewriting stopped years ago. Now, he exists in a kind of royal limbo, neither forgiven nor fully condemned, not quite present, but not yet absent, clinging to old photographs and faded uniforms that once meant something. Even his few remaining public defenders have grown quiet, perhaps realizing that this is no longer about protecting a name, but about witnessing a slow human unraveling. And what haunts many within the family most is not the scandal, but the silence. The silence they allowed to grow for too long, until it consumed him. The royal family may never speak the full truth. They may never admit how deeply the damage runs, or how long they watched it unfold from behind closed doors. But today's announcement, this rare crack in the crown's cold exterior, says enough. That Prince Andrew is not well. That the decline is real. That even in a world of diamonds, crowns, and castles, no one is immune from emotional collapse. And now, as the nation watches in stunned silence, there is one final painful realization left to sit with. The boy born into privilege, honor, and expectation may never find his way back. Not to public life, not to peace, not even to himself.